All right, I am here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, and I would like your quick take on what I would say is how propaganda works. And I say this, Alexander, because sometimes it's not about what is reported, but it's about what is omitted. And in this case, we have to go back to the Kavanaugh trial when he was going for the Supreme Court justice seat. And what happened is that NBC News was caught suppressing a story that exonerated many of the claims made against Brett Kavanaugh. And the story, the false accusations that NBC failed to report, came from none other than creepy porn lawyer Michael Avenatti. So Alexander, get into this a little bit. Give us your quick take as to what happened here. It has to do with an affidavit. It has to do with someone that I believe they signed the affidavit, and then they went against the affidavit openly. They told NBC in a video, in an interview, that they don't agree with the affidavit, and then NBC suppressed this story. Get into a little bit of the legal details here and who acted properly, who didn't act properly. Is Avenatti in trouble? Is this anonymous witness in trouble? Because now we have the DOJ that's also been called in to investigate the entire situation.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. The correct word is suppression. This is a straightforward case of evidence being not so much concealed, I'd say, but suppressed. Let's be quite clear what happened. Avenatti, as part of the campaign to prevent Brett Kavanaugh becoming a Supreme Court justice, was conjuring up witnesses who various people who he said, women who he said had been sexually harassed by Brett Kavanaugh. One of them was this person, Swetnick, and he produced a witness who he said was in some ways a corroborative witness of some of the allegations that Swetnick was making. This witness produced an affidavit which supposedly set out the story. Now, it turned out that the witness, according to her account, only glanced through the affidavit that Avenatti prepared. When she examined the affidavit carefully, she found that it said things which she had never actually said, and made claims that she never actually made. Apparently, her evidence really doesn't bear on Kavanaugh or the Kavanaugh case at all. NBC, which followed up the question of this witness, in fact, interviewed her, found out that that was the case, and also suppressed it. Now, if these facts had come out during the whole Supreme Court nomination process, it would have affected that process. I've absolutely no doubt about it. It would have discredited Avenatti even further than he had been discredited. And it would, I am sure, have changed a lot of the people's opinions about what was going on. It would have strengthened the opinions of some people and affected other people's opinions. And you talked about propaganda. Propaganda does involve suppressing information which is bad for you in order to achieve your objective. And the objective, obviously, in this case, one shared, it seems, by Avenatti and by NBC, was to prevent Brett Kavanaugh, becoming a Supreme Court justice. So I think this is an extremely serious story at many levels. I think there are legal issues, there are professional conduct issues where Avenatti is concerned, and there are ethical and moral ones, especially where NBC is concerned, which seems to have sat on a story, or rather suppressed a story, that went against its own agenda. So I think there's a lot of questions to ask. The DOJ is asking some of them. I think the public should ask even more.
Who's in trouble here, Alexander, legally? Because now that the DOJ is going to be investigating this, affidavits are legal documents. You have a lot of people who have signed these affidavits. Michael Avenatti is the lawyer that created these affidavits and got these people to sign. The one anonymous source now is saying that she skimmed over the affidavit and she didn't really read it carefully and she doesn't agree with it, but she signed it. I imagine these legal documents probably got submitted to the House, to Congress. The DOJ has read them. I mean, we have a lot of lies here, and a lot of lies in the middle of what was a legal, correct me if I'm wrong, a legal government proceeding. So who's in trouble here? Or is anyone in trouble?
Well, I mean, well, first of all, it is a process. I mean, we are talking about an appointment of a Supreme Court justice is a process. It was a process that involved the Senate Judiciary Committee, and of course, it has a legal element to it. And you talked about an affidavit. An affidavit is the sworn testimony of a witness. It is given on oath. The witness gives an oath saying that what is in the contents of the affidavit are true. And usually, I mean, if a witness lies, there are severe legal consequences as a result of that. I mean, it can, at a certain extreme, result in, criminal action. It can be conceived of as perjury in some cases. So it is a serious matter. Now, this witness says that the affidavit that she signed, she didn't check properly. Well, we have to see. We don't know. If that isn't true, if she knowingly signed an affidavit that contained falsehoods, then that is a serious matter, and the witness could be in trouble. If Avenatti manipulated a witness by concocting an affidavit that did not correspond with what the witness actually wanted to say, and somehow tricked that witness into signing that affidavit, then of course that is also a very serious matter. In fact, that's an even more serious matter given his role as the lawyer who drafted the affidavit. I mean, again, tricking a witness into lies in that way, I can see that can be a serious criminal offence also. As for NBC, I doubt that they've committed any criminal offences or could be construed as having committed criminal offences. But as I said, it's very difficult to see their behaviour as anything but deeply unethical, and in a fair world, in a just world, that should affect their credibility.
Would you not say, Alexander, that NBC had an obligation, if they had this type of evidence that proved contrary to many of the claims that Avenatti, Swetnick, and this anonymous source, well, according to Avenatti's records, this anonymous source made in sworn testimony affidavits, did NBC not have an obligation to submit this evidence over to Congress and to the House? I mean, it sounds only right that they should have said, hey, look, guys, these affidavits, so there's some contradictions going on here.
If they were a reputable news organization, they absolutely would have had such an obligation. Now, it might not have been a legal obligation, but it would certainly have been an ethical and a moral one. If they didn't feel that they had such an obligation, then they cannot, it seems to me, claim to be a reputable news organization. They are something else. And we come back to what you were talking about at your very first question about propaganda. Suppressing information like this, behaving unethically in this fashion, is what propaganda stations and propaganda organizations do. So I think NBC needs to ask itself some very serious questions about what it's all about. And I think it needs to give a very full explanation of its conduct. And if it turns out that this was intentionally suppressed because it was going to affect Kavanaugh's nomination, then I think, frankly, some people in NBC should be asked to leave. The people who were responsible should be asked to leave. And NBC owes a massive apology to the Senate Judiciary Committee, who are fully entitled to see this evidence and to know what the truth was, and by extension to the American people and to Brett Kavanaugh himself.
And finally, Alexander, this seems very serious now that the DOJ is being called in to investigate. But Avenatti seems like he doesn't have a care in the world. I mean, he was in Politicon, in the conference for Politicon. He was giving, statements, taking selfies. Swetnick has gone into hiding. Do you think that these guys, wouldn't you think that these guys should be worried? Or do you think that they've got nothing to worry about? Because to me, or is this going to be a long process and Avenatti and Swetnick just don't know what's about to hit them yet?
Well, I have to say, first of all, that bluff and bluster are very much a trademark of the way Avenatti behaves. So one mustn't assume that because he's, putting on a very brave, if I can call it that, a very brazen front, he doesn't internally feel that he's got serious reasons to be worried. And perhaps he does have very serious reasons to be worried. But let's also be frank about this. He's got very powerful friends in the United States. He's got very powerful friends in the Democratic Party, in the Senate, in the media. And I think he probably feels ultimately that these powerful friends will see him through this and that he doesn't, in the end, have to worry. I hope he is wrong. I think that if there is a concept of due justice and the rule of law in the United States, that should be seen through. And if he has behaved as he appears to have behaved, then the appropriate action should follow. I think if he's committed criminal offences by manipulating a witness, and I mean, we don't have the full story yet, we need to see. But if that is the position, then however brazenly he behaves, I think action should be taken by the Department of Justice and by other people also.
And this is something that midterm elections won't be able to help him out in because the DOJ is on it, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it shouldn't make any difference. It shouldn't make any difference who wins, who loses at the midterm elections. As I said, if what we're talking about is the administration, the proper administration of the law, then it should be completely impartial. Unfortunately, as we both know, that isn't how it always works in reality. We will have to wait and see. But at the very least, we need a full explanation from all the parties involved, from Avenatti, from the DOJ, and from NBC, of exactly what happened.
All right, Alexander Mercouris, thank you for your quick take on this story about NBC suppressing news that would have exonerated many of the claims made against Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah. All right, guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt. In the description link down below, you'll find links to our PayPal and Patreon page. Please donate, it really helps out a lot. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you once again. Until next time, take care.